Have you ever stopped to think about how many times you've regretted something you said in the heat of the moment? A harsh word, an unnecessary opinion, a promise you couldn't keep. Now think about the opposite. How many times have you regretted remaining silent, observing? How many times has stillness brought you clarity instead of confusion? We live in a world that screams. A world of instant opinions, of ceaseless notifications, of constant pressure to take a stand, to speak up, to be heard. Silence has become uncomfortable, almost synonymous with weakness or ignorance. But what if I told you that the greatest strength, the most profound wisdom, lies not in what we say but in what we choose not to say? Imagine yourself in a room full of noise. Everyone is talking at once, competing for attention. Now picture a single person in a corner, quiet, just observing. Who do you think truly understands what is happening in that room? Who notices the subtle tensions, the unspoken alliances, the truth behind the masks? The one who speaks less is not the one who knows less. Often they are the only one who truly knows. This journey is not about becoming mute or passive. It's about becoming intentional. It's about discovering the art of observing the world and yourself with a depth that the constant noise robs from us. It's about turning silence into your greatest tool for power, connection, and self-knowledge. If you are seeking more emotional balance, clarity for your decisions, and the wisdom to navigate life's complexities, then this space was made for you. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. With each video we delve deeper into the journey of self-knowledge, strengthening our inner core to see the world as it truly is. 1. The noise of the modern world and the hunger for silence. I remember spending entire days immersed in an ocean of information. I would wake up to the sound of notifications, read the news during breakfast, listen to podcasts in traffic, participate in meetings where everyone talked and few listened, and end the day scrolling through an infinite feed of other people's lives. I was connected to everything except myself. This overload of stimuli created a subtle anxiety, a feeling that I was always behind, always needing to know more, say more, be more. Modern culture has sold us the idea that a person's value is linked to their visibility and their voice. We are encouraged to have an opinion on everything, from international politics to the latest celebrity scandal. Silence is seen as a vacuum to be filled. In a conversation, a pause of more than 3 seconds can create a palpable awkwardness. We feel the need to fill it with anything, even an empty comment, just to avoid the discomfort of silence. This aversion to stillness is not just social, it has become internal. Try sitting in a quiet room for 10 minutes with no distractions. What happens? For most of us, the mind begins to scream. An avalanche of thoughts, worries, to-do lists, and imaginary dialogues takes over. The external noise is often an escape from our own internal noise. We use the world's clamor to drown out the difficult questions our soul is trying to ask us. I realized that this constant exposure to noise was eroding my ability to think deeply. My thoughts became shallow, reactive. I wasn't forming my own conclusions, I was just echoing the loudest voices I heard. Creativity, which flourishes in space and silence, was being suffocated. I was becoming a repeater, not a thinker. It was at this point of saturation that I began to feel a desperate hunger for silence. Not just the absence of sound, but an intentional silence. I started creating small islands of quiet in my day. A walk without headphones, the first 15 minutes of the morning without touching my phone, driving in silence. At first it was unbearable. The anxiety spiked. But gradually something began to change. Silence ceased to be a frightening void and started to become a fertile space. A space where I could finally hear myself. The journey to observe more and speak less begins here. By recognizing that the noise we live in is not the natural state of things, but an imposed condition that we can and must challenge. 2. The power of the observing silence. There is an old analogy that compares the mind to a lake. When the mind is agitated, full of thoughts and words, the lake is turbulent, and its murky surface reflects nothing with clarity. But when the mind calms, when silence settles in, the lake becomes serene. Its surface turns into a perfect mirror, reflecting the sky, the trees, and reality exactly as it is. This is the power of the observing silence. When I decided to practice silent observation, I started to notice a universe of information that had previously escaped me. In work meetings, instead of rushing to give my opinion, I would lean back and watch. I saw who leaned forward when speaking, who crossed their arms defensively, who avoided eye contact when disagreeing. I noticed the micro-expressions that revealed the true emotion behind the polished words. Body language, tone of voice, pauses, all of it told a much richer and truer story than the verbal discourse. This practice transformed my interactions. I became a better listener, not because I was waiting for my turn to speak, but because I was genuinely curious about what the other person was communicating on every level. People began to open up to me more. They felt seen, heard in a way they rarely experienced. Silence, when accompanied by an attentive presence, is not empty, it is an invitation. It says to the other person, I am here with you. What you have to say is important, and I have all the time in the world to listen. Observing silence also gave me a strategic advantage. In negotiations or difficult discussions, I learned to ask a question and then remain completely silent. People have a natural aversion to a vacuum. They feel the need to fill it. And in doing so, they often reveal their true intentions, their fears, their limits. Silence became a tool to extract the truth without pressure, without confrontation. The most powerful person in the room is not the one who speaks the loudest, but the one who controls the silence. Internally, the benefits were even more profound. By observing the world without the constant need to narrate or judge it, my mind began to calm down. I could see the beauty in small things, the way the light filtered through a leaf, the intricate pattern of a spider's web. The world became more vibrant, more alive. Silence did not disconnect me from the world. On the contrary, it connected me in a much more intimate and real way. It taught me that to truly understand anything, be it a person, a problem, or yourself, the first step is not to speak but to observe. 3. Speak less, listen more, the key to real connection. I always considered myself a good friend, someone who gave good advice. But as I reflected on the art of observation, I noticed a flawed pattern in my behavior. When a friend came to me with a problem, my immediate reaction was to interrupt, offer solutions, tell a story of my own that seemed similar. I thought I was helping, but in reality I was hijacking the conversation. I was making their problem about me. My need to speak, to fix it, was preventing me from doing the one thing they truly needed, to listen. True listening is one of the rarest and purest forms of respect. It goes beyond simply not interrupting. It is the practice of silencing your own mind, your own opinions and judgments, to create a safe space for the other person to fully express themselves. When I started practicing active listening, asking open-ended questions like, and how did that make you feel? Instead of, you should have done this, the quality of my relationships changed overnight. People don't seek advice most of the time. They seek an echo. They seek someone who can witness their pain, their joy, their confusion without judgment. They want to know that they are not alone in their feelings. By offering the gift of my silence and my full attention, I was offering validation. And validation is one of the pillars of human connection. Speaking less also taught me to be more precise and impactful when I finally did speak. Before, my words were like a torrential downpour, abundant but scattered and with little effect. Now, I strive for them to be like well-aimed raindrops, each with a purpose. By spending more time listening and observing, I had a much deeper understanding of the situation. When I did offer a perspective, it was more informed, more empathetic, and consequently, much more valuable. People started to take my words more seriously because they knew they were not spoken lightly. This practice also disarmed conflicts before they even began. In heated arguments, our tendency is to react, defend our position, raise our voice. I learned to do the opposite. When faced with anger or frustration, I would take a deep breath and listen. I would let the other person empty their emotional cup. Often, the mere act of being heard would dissipate half the anger. Then, calmly, I could respond in a considered manner, focusing on solutions instead of blame. Speaking less and listening more is not a tactic of passivity, it is a strategy of active peace. It is the art of building bridges where others build walls. For, the wisdom hidden in the pause. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. This quote, often attributed to Viktor Frankl, perfectly captures the essence of the wisdom found in the pause. I was a reactive person. An annoying email would arrive, and my immediate response was to draft an equally annoyed reply. Someone would make a sarcastic comment, and my tongue was already armed with a sharp comeback. I lived on autopilot, reacting to circumstances rather than responding to them consciously. My life was a series of chain reactions, and I felt powerless like a leaf in the wind, carried away by the emotions of the moment. The discovery of the pause was revolutionary. The pause is that 1 second, or those 5 seconds, you take before speaking or acting. It is a deliberate act of interrupting the autopilot. I started practicing this in small situations. Before replying to a message, I would put my phone down, take 3 deep breaths and ask myself, what is the wisest and most helpful response here, rather than the most emotionally satisfying one? This small pause opened up a world of possibilities. It gave me time to process the information, to distance myself from my initial emotional reaction, and to consider the consequences of my words. Instead of escalating conflicts, I began to de-escalate them. Instead of making impulsive decisions I would later regret, I started making choices aligned with my long-term values and goals. The pause was my gateway to emotional intelligence. The beauty of the pause is that it can be used anywhere at any time. In a negotiation, a pause before responding to an offer can signal confidence and make the other party reconsider their position. In a conversation with a loved one, a pause before reacting to criticism can turn a fight into an opportunity for understanding. In a moment of panic, a pause to breathe can bring the clarity needed to find a solution. The pause is the cradle of wisdom. It is in the momentary silence of the pause that intuition speaks. It is in this space that we can access a calmer, more centered part of ourselves, a part that is not governed by the wounded ego or by anxiety. By cultivating the habit of the pause, we are actually training our mind to be less reactive and more creative. We are reclaiming our power of choice. We cannot control what happens to us, but the pause grants us full control over how we respond. And that, my friend, is true freedom. 5. The inner observer, self-knowledge through silence. The journey of observing the outer world inevitably leads us to an even deeper journey, that of observing our inner world. For a long time, I believed that I was my thoughts and emotions. If I felt anger, I was an angry person. If I had an anxious thought, I was an anxious person. I was completely fused with the chaotic stream of my own mind, and it was exhausting. Silence introduced me to a transformative concept, that of the inner observer, or the witness consciousness. The idea is simple yet profound. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who observes your thoughts. Imagine yourself sitting by the bank of a river. The thoughts and emotions are like leaves, branches, and boats floating by in the current. Some are pleasant, others are disturbing. Your task is not to jump into the river and be carried away by the current, nor to try to stop the flow. Your task is simply to sit on the bank and watch it all go by. I started practicing this through meditation and moments of silent introspection. I would sit and just watch what arose in my mind without judgment. I noticed patterns I had never seen before. I realized how certain triggers, a criticism, a memory, a piece of news, always set off the same cascades of negative thoughts. I noticed the stories I told myself, the limiting beliefs that operated silently in the backstage of my consciousness. By stepping back and just observing, the power these thoughts and emotions had over me began to diminish. Anger would still arise, but now I could say, here is anger. It's interesting how it manifests in my body, with a tightness in my chest and heat in my face. Instead of being the anger, I became the observer of the anger. This small shift in perspective is the difference between being a prisoner and being the guard of your own mind. This process of silent self-observation is the purest form of self-knowledge. No one needs to tell us who we are. The answers are all within us, waiting to be heard. In the silence, we can finally hear the whispers of our intuition, the unmet needs of our body, and the true aspirations of our soul. We discover our deepest values, not the ones society has imposed on us, but the ones that resonate with our authentic being. Speaking less and observing more ultimately is about this. It's about silencing the external noise so we can finally hear the wisdom that already exists within us. It is a path back home to our center. By cultivating this inner observer, we cease to be victims of our own moods and become the conscious architects of our life experience. 6. Silence as a tool of power and influence. On the chessboard of life and human interactions, we often think that power lies in the most aggressive move, in the piece that moves the most. But the grandmasters know that power often resides in restraint, in waiting, in the silence that forces the opponent to make a mistake. Silence, when used with intention, is one of the most potent tools of power and influence. I remember a professional situation where I was at a disadvantage. I needed something from a superior who was known for being intimidating and talkative. Instead of approaching with a long speech full of justifications, which would only make him feel attacked, I changed my strategy. I presented my request concisely and clearly. And then, I did the hardest thing, I fell silent. The silence that followed was thick and uncomfortable. I could see on his face that he expected me to continue, to justify myself, to show weakness. But I just held his gaze, calm and present. This unexpected silence transferred the pressure to him. He had to fill the void. And in doing so, he began to argue against himself, to think out loud, to reveal his own hesitations, and ultimately to find a way to meet my request. I did not convince him with words, I influenced him with my silence. People in positions of true authority are rarely the loudest. Think of leaders, mentors, or historical figures you admire. Often, their presence was marked by a thoughtful calm. Their words were sparse, but each one carried immense weight. This is because scarcity creates value. When you speak constantly, your words become cheap. But when you speak rarely and only when you have something significant to say, people fall silent to listen. Your silence amplifies the power of your voice. Silence also projects confidence. The need to fill every second of a conversation often comes from insecurity, the fear that silence will be interpreted as a lack of knowledge. Someone who is comfortable with silence, who can hold a pause, projects self-assurance. It communicates non-verbally that you have nothing to prove. You are secure in yourself and your position. However, it is crucial to distinguish this powerful silence from passive or aggressive silence. This is not about giving this silent treatment or withdrawing from a conversation. It is an active, engaged silence, accompanied by attentive listening and a strong presence. It is a tool to create space, to provoke reflection, and to allow the truth to surface. By mastering the art of using silence strategically, you cease to be just another voice in the crowd and become a presence that shapes the conversation without needing to dominate it. 7. Overcoming the need for external validation. Why do we talk so much? Why do we feel this compulsion to share every thought, every achievement, every opinion? If we are honest with ourselves, the answer often lies in a deep and human need, the need for validation. We want others to see us, to approve of us, to tell us that we are smart, funny, successful, that we are right. We use our words like mirrors, hoping to see a positive reflection in the eyes of others. I lived a large part of my life in this cycle. My self-esteem was tied to the feedback I received. A post with many likes gave me a spike of euphoria. A compliment in a meeting fueled my ego for a day. But this external validation is like junk food. It satisfies momentarily, but it doesn't truly nourish and leaves us wanting more soon after. To live in search of validation is to live in a state of dependency, handing the keys to our happiness over to others. The practice of observing more and speaking less is a direct antidote to this dependency. When you commit to silence, you are forced to find validation within yourself. There is no audience to applaud your silent thoughts. There are no likes for your internal observations. You are left alone with yourself, and in that space you must learn to be your own source of approval. At first, this process is uncomfortable. The ego screams for attention. It wants to show off, to prove its worth. But by resisting this urge, you begin to build a new kind of self-confidence, one that is not fragile and dependent on the outside world. You start to trust your own judgment, to value your own perceptions. You realize that you do not need everyone's agreement for your thought to be valid. Speaking less taught me to act more. Instead of talking about the books I was going to read, I simply read them. Instead of announcing my plans to start a new project, I worked on it in silence. The satisfaction began to come from the act itself, from the accomplishment itself, and not from the acclaim that accompanied it. I discovered that the validation that comes from real progress and alignment with your own values is much deeper and more lasting than any praise. Overcoming the need for validation does not mean becoming indifferent to others. It means interacting from a place of fullness, not of lack. You can share your ideas not because you need approval, but because you genuinely believe they can add value. You can listen to others' opinions without feeling threatened, because your identity is not at stake. By silencing the search for applause, you finally find the freedom to be authentically yourself. We have reached the end of our reflection, but the beginning of a new practice. We've seen that the modern world pushes us towards noise, but that our soul longs for silence. We've discovered that observing in silence gives us access to a deeper layer of reality, that truly listening is the greatest gift we can give someone, and that the pause before speaking is the cradle of wisdom. We have learned that silence can be a tool of power, a door to self-knowledge, and a path to free ourselves from the need for external validation. The art of observing more and speaking less is not about restriction, but about expansion. It's about expanding our perception, our empathy, our awareness, and our inner peace. Now the invitation turns to you. This is not a change that happens overnight. It is a practice, a muscle to be trained. Start small. Choose one conversation today where you will commit to listening more than you speak. Take 5 minutes out of your day to sit in silence, just watching your thoughts go by. Practice the pause before replying to that message that annoyed you. Remember, in a world that rewards noise, intentional silence is a revolutionary act. It is an act of power, of wisdom, and of profound self-love. You do not need to shout to be heard. Your silent, attentive presence can have a much greater impact. Before you go, I want you to reflect and share in the comments. What recent conversation in your life do you believe would have been profoundly different if you had practiced the art of observing more and speaking less? Your story could inspire others on this journey. Thank you for dedicating your time to this reflection. Continue to seek the wisdom that exists in stillness. Until the next video.